Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Thursday, 17th April 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. China is actively navigating a complex landscape of international diplomacy and economic strategies amidst global economic uncertainty. President Xi Jinping's Southeast Asia tour included assurances to Malaysia of China's commitment to regional stability and urged Vietnam to resist unilateral bullying. He also called on Cambodia to jointly oppose hegemonism and power politics. Premier Li Qiang is prioritizing open trade to support Chinese businesses. Despite a 5.4% growth rate, analysts anticipate U.S. tariffs will impact China's economic performance. Li Chenggang was appointed as China's new top international trade negotiator, replacing Wang Shaowen, as China filed a WTO complaint over U.S. tariffs. China has stated it is not afraid of a trade war with the U.S. and will ignore the U.S. tariff numbers game. Coastal province chiefs are assisting export firms in finding new markets. China is strategically planning Tomica's global expansion, prioritizing countries with favorable geopolitics. China has nationalized and consolidated rare earth mines in the south, seizing mines and building factories. The Chinese embassy defended Jinji, owner of British Steel, criticizing British figures for slandering China. China is reportedly snubbing a major UK summit on energy security. The United States is experiencing heightened trade tensions with China, evident in escalating tariffs that have spurred a WTO complaint from China. Dozens of nations are seeking reductions or exemptions from President Trump's import taxes. These tariffs are predicted to cause a plunge in container bookings from China, though shipping traffic in the rest of Asia is rebounding due to a U.S. tariff pause. Jake Sullivan credited managing China competition, in part, to time spent in cities around the world with China's Wang Yi, and criticized a zero-sum view of China-U.S. relations. Secretary of State Marco Rubio put about 40 employees on leave who had tracked disinformation by China, Russia, Iran, and terrorist groups. The World Trade Organization forecasts a potential 0.2% decrease in global trade volume this year due to tariff policies. China's grave concern over U.S. tariffs led to its WTO complaint. WTO Director General Ngotsi Okonjo Iweala fears a decoupling of the economies of China and the U.S. due to Trump's tariff war. Hong Kong is impacted by the trade disputes between the U.S. and China, despite its status as a free port. The Hong Kong post office will cease parcel shipments to the U.S. due to tariffs. Escalating U.S.-China trade tensions have cast doubt on Hong Kong's future as a gateway for Chinese mainland tech firms expanding abroad. Hang Zhengbang promoted the son of Hong Kong leader John Lee in a reshuffle of its China unit amidst the U.S. tariff campaign. In South America, a Chinese delegation is discussing a railway linked to a Peru megaport with Brazil to enhance trade. Japan's chief trade negotiator is visiting the U.S. for trade talks. Japan took note and invested in Australia after China nationalized and consolidated rare earth mines in the south into a state-run company and seized mines and built factories. The European Union is potentially pivoting towards China due to Donald Trump's hostility, which has drawn warnings from us officials. Japan is navigating a complex trade landscape with the United States, where Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba aims to build a rapport with President Trump, akin to that of his predecessor, Shinzo Abe. These discussions are vital amidst growing worries about U.S. tariffs impacting Japan's exports. Canon Institute's Kazuhito Yamashita suggests Japan must position its goods as indispensable to overcome tariff barriers. The rising cost of domestic rice, which has surged by 70%, is also leading more Japanese consumers to opt for foreign rice, especially from the US, potentially giving Tokyo flexibility in trade negotiations. President Trump's focus on these negotiations is partly driven by a perspective rooted in the trade tensions of the 1980s with Japan. Domestically, Japan is tackling several issues, including cybersecurity threats, with Rakuten Securities and other online brokerages reporting account hackings. The Environment Ministry is pushing local governments to enhance lithium-ion battery disposal methods. A court ruled the government must pay 110,000 yen for illegally detaining a Peruvian man of Japanese descent. In Nara, increased police patrols are responding to animal abuse, after a video surfaced showing a tourist kicking a sacred deer. Japan is also contemplating new laws to combat illegal online betting after scandals involving baseball players and comedians. 4 individuals were arrested for selling AI-generated pornography, with one suspect reportedly making $70,000 in a year. Medically, Japan has made significant progress in treating Parkinson's disease by improving symptoms in patients through transplanted nerve cells derived from EPS cells. Turning to the United States, the economy is feeling the repercussions of trade wars and tariffs, prompting the Federal Reserve to express concerns about potential economic deceleration and increased inflation. These concerns have rippled through Wall Street, leading to sharp declines following warnings from the Federal Reserve Chair. President Trump is actively engaged in trade discussions with Japan, seeking to resolve trade imbalances. The U.S. is the source of much foreign rice that is tariff-free, accounting for 60% of Japan's import limit. El Salvador found itself at the center of controversy regarding U.S. deportation policies. The Trump administration sent 238 individuals, allegedly with gang affiliations, to a maximum security prison under a wartime act. This policy faced both legal challenges and widespread criticism. A U.S. judge even found probable cause to hold administration officials in contempt for violating a deportation order concerning Venezuelan migrants sent to El Salvador. One notable case involved Quilma Abrigo Garcia, wrongly deported from Maryland to an El Salvador prison. Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen traveled to El Salvador to advocate for Garcia's release, but his efforts to meet with Garcia were unsuccessful. Despite experts asserting that President Nayib Bukele holds the authority to facilitate Garcia's return to the U.S., there appears to be a lack of interest in doing so. The legality of the Trump administration's decision to deport immigrants to a maximum security prison is currently being contested in court. Iran's nuclear program is under intense international scrutiny as the IAEA assesses the nation is nearing nuclear bomb capability. Despite calls from the former U.S. administration to halt uranium enrichment, Iran's foreign minister insists it is non-negotiable, but has expressed willingness to build confidence in its program. Nuclear talks between Iran and the U.S. are scheduled for Rome, coinciding with the IAEA chief's visit to Tehran to discuss inspector access. Iran's president has approved the resignation of a vice president who was a key negotiator in the 2015 nuclear deal. Abbas Araghchi, Iran's envoy to talks with the United States, said Iran plans to participate calmly and coolly, despite shifting U.S. messages. The U.S. has imposed new sanctions on Chinese importers of Iranian oil to increase pressure during these critical nuclear program talks. Israel will continue to block humanitarian aid from entering Gaza, according to Defense Minister Israel Katz, who considers this a key pressure tactic against Hamas. The Israeli military has created a buffer zone, converting 30% of Gaza's territory. Katz indicated that troops will maintain an indefinite presence in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria. This military action has resulted in a broad security zone within Gaza, forcing Palestinians into smaller areas. These actions have drawn criticism, including from members of the Board of Deputies representing British Jews, with 36 signatories of an open letter condemning the war. The UK Foreign Office confirmed that Foreign Secretary David Lammy met with Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar in London, while activists have requested an arrest warrant for Saar for alleged complicity in war crimes. In response to the Gaza war, the Maldives has barred Israeli passport holders from entering the country. Additionally, Israel developed plans to attack Iranian nuclear facilities, requiring U.S. assistance, but then President Trump blocked a planned Israeli strike on Iranian nuclear sites to pursue a deal with Tehran. United Kingdom Supreme Court has determined that the Equality Act 2010 defines woman and sex as biological, potentially impacting transgender rights and sparking debate. Meanwhile, bakery chain Gales is dropping its soya milk surcharge after pressure from PETA, but oat milk will still incur an extra charge. In environmental news, UK wildfires have surged dramatically, damaging ecosystems and threatening wildlife. Ukraine has extended martial law until August, maintaining its ability to mobilize and postpone elections. Discussions are underway between Ukrainian ministers and UK pharmaceutical firms to address potential U.S. tariff impacts on medicine supplies. It has also been reported that the Trump administration lowered Ukraine aid projections during mineral deal negotiations. Canada is seeing heated debates among its leaders as the political landscape evolves. Prime Minister Mark Carney faced Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre in a spirited French-language debate. The central question revolved around who could best manage relations with Donald Trump and address potential tariff threats. Poilievre aims to unseat the Liberals after a decade in power, but his party is grappling with the potential negative impact of the Trump effect. The Green Party's exclusion from election debates, deemed a potential disruption, has sparked controversy. The timing of the first debate was adjusted to avoid conflicting with the Montreal Canadiens hockey game. Meanwhile, the West Island of Ontario Place in Toronto is being redeveloped by a European spa company. Turning to France, the nation is preparing to host the 2030 Winter Olympics, an event that promises significant economic and infrastructural developments. The French government is collaborating with regional authorities to ensure a seamless and sustainable execution of the Games. President Emmanuel Macron has emphasized the importance of leveraging the Olympics to showcase France's commitment to environmental responsibility and technological innovation. In Germany, economic indicators are under close scrutiny as the country navigates a complex global landscape. The latest reports suggest a need for cautious optimism, with policymakers closely monitoring inflation and employment rates. The government is implementing measures to stimulate growth and support key industries, focusing on sustainable practices and technological advancements to secure economic future. Shifting to Australia, discussions are ongoing regarding the optimal management of its natural resources, particularly concerning mining and environmental conservation. The government is working to balance economic opportunities with the need to protect unique ecosystems. New policies are being developed to ensure responsible resource extraction and promote sustainable development practices across the country. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is committed to protecting the nation's trade interests with the United States. In a pre-election debate, Albanese expressed impartiality towards both U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Meanwhile, opposition leader Peter Dutton has outlined tax bracket indexing as a future policy goal, emphasizing the Liberal Party's focus on budget consolidation without a definite schedule. The debate's outcome is being touted as a win by both parties. Public trust in the U.S. has decreased in Australia because of Trump's tariffs and perceived instability. Nevertheless, the U.S. alliance maintains strong support, with 80% of Australians considering it crucial for their country's security. On the home front, Adelaide has joined the ranks of Australian capitals, with a median house value surpassing $1 billion. Overall home price growth across Australia has decelerated to its lowest point in 2 years. Sydney's Northern Beaches Hospital is facing scrutiny after a report alleged that it failed to meet healthcare standards, posing a risk of failure. This is further complicated by the recent deaths of 2 children at the hospital. Creative Australia is experiencing internal instability, with CEO Adrian Collette on leave and an investigation ongoing. This follows criticism from staff and 600 literary figures concerning the Sabi fallout. Environmentally, endangered greater gliders have been observed in the proposed Great Koala National Park in New South Wales. This is happening while logging operations continue, leading conservation groups to call for immediate wildlife protection measures. Germany is grappling with a chilling case as a palliative care doctor in Berlin faces murder charges for allegedly killing 15 patients using lethal sedatives, with arson also suspected to cover up the crimes. Meanwhile, U.S. tariffs under President Trump are jeopardizing the business of a small German nutcracker manufacturer heavily reliant on American sales. Chancellor Olaf Scholz is preparing to meet Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk in Warsaw, a meeting made more significant by the anticipated transition of the chancellorship to Friedrich Merz, a move that follows a period of strained German-Polish relations under Scholz, marked by disagreements on issues like reparations. Further abroad, a German delegation has been in Bangladesh, seeking to strengthen trade partnerships in the face of global tariff pressures. In Taiwan, activist Song Xinliang sparked outrage by appearing at the New Taipei District Prosecutor's Office, adorned with a Nazi armband and carrying a Chinese translation of Mein Kampf. India's economic ties with the United States are robust, marking the U.S. as its top trading partner for the 4th consecutive year in 2024-25, despite a contraction in exports to China. The EU's updated asylum policies now list India, Bangladesh, and Egypt as safe countries, aiming to speed up asylum processes. In the United States, Indian student Krish Lal Viswadasani joined a legal challenge against deportation. A U.S. federal judge granted Viswadasani a temporary stay, allowing him to complete his studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. This case is part of a broader trend of similar legal actions across various states. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance is scheduled to visit India for meetings with key leaders and cultural site visits. The U.S. will send Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff to Paris for talks with European allies concerning the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. However, European officials are reportedly doubtful about the influence of President Trump's aides, believing Trump's decisions will ultimately prevail despite established transatlantic partnerships. Turning to Canada, Ontario Premier Doug Ford has initiated a review of Thermos Toronto waterfront lease. This action follows a New York Times expose highlighting firms' inflated credentials and alleging inequity and opacity in the agreement. Russia's President Vladimir Putin praised Elon Musk, drawing parallels between him and Sergei Korolev, a pivotal figure in the Soviet space endeavor. In legal developments, journalists Sergei Karelin, Konstantin Gabov, Antonina Favarskaya, and Artyom Kreger were sentenced to over 5 years for their links to Alexei Navalny. Corruption charges resulted in the arrest of Alexei B. Smirnov, ex-governor of the Kursk region, along with his deputy, accused of embezzling defense construction funds, which failed to prevent a Ukrainian strike. Former UK Defense Minister Grant Shapps criticized Donald Trump's positive stance on Putin and Russia, likening Trump's description of the semi-strike as a mistake to statements by the IRA terror group. Separately, Bridget McKenzie admitted her claim of Russian and Chinese preference for an Albanese victory was inaccurate, attributing it to unsubstantiated remarks from foreign politicians. Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, is set to meet with Donald Trump in the U.S., where tariffs will likely be a central topic. Meloni's visit occurs amid rising global trade tensions and her reputation for fostering collaboration within Europe. Meanwhile, Italy has witnessed a remarkable comeback in its wolf population following near extinction, now boasting the largest wolf population in Europe, thanks to effective conservation initiatives. Guided tours are now offered by Italian organizations, leading small groups into the forests for wolf observation. Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba conferred with leaders from Malaysia and France, addressing methods to cushion the global economy and multilateral trade against negative impact. In Malaysia, the nation voiced its backing for China in the face of potential U.S. tariffs. Malaysia and China reinforced ties by inking multiple deals spanning artificial intelligence, infrastructural projects, and agricultural initiatives. Both leaders championed open trade principles. Prime Minister Anwar might capitalize on this deepened bond to pursue enhanced educational collaborations, considering the rising number of Chinese students opting for Malaysian education and parental investment in Malaysian real estate. South Korea is deepening its economic ties with Vietnam as both nations seek to mitigate the impact of potential tariff-related disruptions. Vietnam is actively courting South Korean firms, including the tech giant Samsung, to bolster their investment and manufacturing presence within its borders. Samsung presently produces more than 60% of its mobile phones in Vietnam. Shifting focus to aviation safety within South Korea, a probe into the Jeju Air Flight 2216 mishap at Muan International Airport has uncovered lapses in adherence to established safety protocols, both international and domestic, that are specifically aimed at preventing such accidents. Singaporean leaders have voiced apprehension about the effects of tariffs and the continuing trade war, stressing the importance of taking proactive steps to lessen potential economic harm. Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong remarked that the postponement of US tariffs provides little comfort, urging vigilance. Lawrence Wong noted a pattern of governments regaining control of resources because of trade war uncertainties, predicting that external aid might not be easily accessible. A task force headed by Trade and Industry Minister Kim Yong has cautioned that disorderly tariffs could adversely impact Singapore's economy, suggesting a readiness to modify existing support schemes for companies and employees. In spite of these global concerns, analysts believe that domestic matters and parliamentary viewpoints will likely be more important to voters in the next election than concerns over US tariffs. Pakistan recently engaged in Foreign Office consultations with Bangladesh, the first such meeting in 15 years. This signals a potential warming of relations. The last time these countries met was during the interim government of Muhammad Yunus. Meanwhile, in Pakistan's Balochistan province, a bomb blast struck a bus carrying 40 policemen in Mastundant. The Islamic State has claimed responsibility for the attack, which resulted in 3 deaths. The World Health Organization recently concluded 3 years of pandemic treaty negotiations, reaching a compromise before the United States withdrew following President Trump's inauguration. Turning to New Zealand, Winston Peters is reportedly communicating the necessity of continued U.S. investment and involvement in the Pacific, addressing worries about a potential decline in U.S. regional engagement. Meanwhile, in the United States, President Trump's suggested tariffs on imported drugs are raising concerns about the possibility of higher consumer prices, medication rationing, and shortages of vital medications. Myanmar's military junta has released nearly 900 prisoners under an amnesty to mark the traditional New Year, though the number of political prisoners freed is yet to be confirmed. The country is simultaneously managing the fallout from its most powerful earthquake in over a century, resulting in widespread displacement. These disaster relief operations are being significantly hampered by the ongoing civil conflict. Compounding the nation's woes, rescued trafficking victims from scam operations in Myanmar have stated a preference for death over returning, highlighting the extreme abuse they suffered. North Korea has condemned the United States for flying long-range bombers over South Korea. The North Korean government views this as a provocative act, escalating military tensions in the region. Adding to regional concerns, South Korean police revealed that North Korea initiated a large-scale phishing campaign. The cyber attack involved sending over 120,000 emails to roughly 18,000 individuals. The emails used K-pop and horoscopes as bait to trick recipients. Peru witnessed a major legal development as former President Ollanta Humala and his wife, Nadine Heredia, received 15-year prison sentences for money laundering. Subsequently, Brazil extended diplomatic asylum to Heredia, facilitating her departure to Brazil. Brazil's Serra Verde rare earths mine highlights China's grip on strategic minerals. American investors back the mine. However, almost all of its output is destined for China. This underscores China's influence in the rare earths market. New Zealand grapples with climate finance commitments and severe weather. The government has yet to decide on its climate finance contributions beyond 2025, according to a Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade spokesperson. Cyclone Tam brought heavy rain and strong winds over the Easter weekend, causing traffic disruptions and power outages across parts of the country. In Australia, debate continues over proposed changes to offshore gas regulation. Resources Minister Madeleine King aims to ensure new gas projects benefit Australians, leading to discussions on potential regulatory amendments. Meanwhile, the Australian economy shows signs of resilience. Employment figures released this week surpassed expectations, although concerns remain about inflation and interest rate pressures. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau addressed the ongoing wildfires in Western Canada. He pledged federal support to affected provinces, emphasizing the need for coordinated efforts to combat the blazes and assist displaced residents. Separately, discussions continue regarding potential adjustments to Canada's immigration policies. The government is considering measures to better align immigration levels with labor market demands. Shifting focus to the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's government faces scrutiny over its handling of the National Health Service, NHS. Opposition parties criticize rising waiting lists and staffing shortages, prompting renewed calls for increased investment in healthcare. Economically, the UK is navigating a period of uncertainty. Recent data indicates a slowdown in economic growth, raising concerns about a potential recession. Latvia, joining Poland and fellow Baltic states, will withdraw from the Ottawa Treaty of 1997, which bans anti-personnel mines. The decision reflects increasing anxiety regarding possible Russian aggression in the region. Hungary faces increasing scrutiny from the European Union as MEPs push for the suspension of the country's pride ban, citing a hostile atmosphere for LGBTQ individuals. This action follows a visit by a delegation of European Parliament lawmakers, who voiced serious concerns about Hungary's adherence to EU values, suggesting a concerning trajectory regarding LGBTQ rights within the nation. Moving to France, the nation anticipates visits from prominent U.S. figures, including State Secretary Marco Rubio and White House envoy Steve Witkoff. In a startling development, South Africa saw the kidnapping of a U.S. pastor, Josh Sullivan, in Motherwell. Sullivan was abducted while preaching at a local church. Swift police action led to his rescue after a dramatic shootout. 3 suspects were killed during the rescue operation. Mexico relies heavily on natural gas imports from the United States. This reliance is primarily for electricity generation. Concerns exist that the U.S. government could exploit this trade relationship. The exploitation could be for political or economic gain. The European Commission seeks to designate Kosovo, Bangladesh, Colombia, Egypt, India, Morocco, and Tunisia as safe countries of origin. This proposal intends to streamline asylum processes across the European Union member states. The safe country label would allow for quicker processing and potential rejection of asylum claims from citizens of these nations. Afghanistan is preparing to repatriate its citizens residing in Pakistan, according to the Afghan Consul General in Peshawar. A special commission has been formed to manage and facilitate the repatriation process. Cambodia's political landscape remains deeply affected by the Khmer Rouge's rise and fall. A half-century after Phnom Penh fell to the regime, the Cambodian People's Party's legitimacy is still impacted by this history. French photographer Roland Neveu documented the Khmer Rouge's entry into Phnom Penh in 1975, marking the beginning of a brutal era for the country. Somalia faced a renewed challenge as al-Shabaab fighters launched an attack on Aden Yabal, a key town and significant base for government forces in the central region. The situation remains unclear, with both sides claiming control after the assault, casting doubts on the government's anti-militant operations. The Philippines recently celebrated the successful hatching of Riley, a significant event for the country's natural heritage preservation efforts. Meanwhile, a potential $5.60 billion deal to acquire us fighter jets is in jeopardy. The Philippines government is concerned that tariffs will inflate the jet's price. These tariffs could disrupt global supply chains and make the deal unaffordable. Chile is at the center of a diplomatic row, as the Chinese embassy there has accused the United States of hegemonism. This accusation stems from remarks made by a Trump nominee about potentially restricting Beijing's access to resources. The embassy statement underscores the growing tensions between China and the U.S. concerning resource control and their respective global influence. Ecuador is seeing rising tensions as Vice President Veronica Abad accuses President Daniel Noboa of abusing state resources to influence the election. Abad claims Noboa should have resigned during his campaign to avoid unfair advantages, arguing his actions threaten democratic principles. Belarus saw the release of journalist Andrei Kosnikic from prison in February, after he completed a 3-year term. Kosnikic worked for the Belarus service of Radio Free Europe, Radio, Tariffs, GRL.T. His release spotlights the continuous struggles for journalists in Belarus. Other RFA/RL journalists, who were also imprisoned, have voiced their concerns about the attempts to shut down the media outlet. These concerns emphasize the limitations on press freedom and the extent of government repression in the country. Vietnam is facing potential economic headwinds as it works to avert a possible 46% duty imposed by the United States. Simultaneously, amidst growing Chinese influence in Southeast Asia, Vietnam is set to host a visit from Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. Commencing on April 27th, Egypt is grappling with reduced Suez Canal revenue in 2024 amid regional instability affecting maritime traffic. Simultaneously, Egypt and China are strengthening military ties through joint air exercises named Eagle of Civilization 2025, evidenced by the arrival of Chinese Y-20 transport planes in Egypt. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government is facing increasing pressure to address rising inflation and housing costs, particularly affecting younger voters. Recent polls indicate a decline in support for the Liberal Party, prompting discussions on potential policy shifts to regain public trust. In the latest from France, President Emmanuel Macron is pushing for greater European Union integration in defense and security policies, advocating for increased military spending and a more unified approach to foreign policy challenges. Macron's proposals are aimed at enhancing Europe's strategic autonomy amid global uncertainties. Shifting focus to Germany, Chancellor Olaf Scholz's coalition government is navigating a complex energy transition while addressing concerns about industrial competitiveness. The government is investing heavily in renewable energy infrastructure and exploring measures to mitigate the impact of rising energy prices on businesses and consumers. Greece's maritime management plans have escalated tensions with Turkey, which perceives the move as a violation of its sovereign rights. Serbia's president plans to attend Russia's Victory Day parade in Moscow, defying warnings from the European Union. The Maldives has amended its immigration laws to prohibit Israeli passport holders in response to the Gaza conflict. Denmark is contemplating sending troops to Ukraine for training purposes. In France, President Emmanuel Macron has pledged retribution for attacks on prisons and staff, labeling them a declaration of war by drug cartels after a crackdown on leaders operating from within correctional facilities. In Paris, journalists staged a die in mourning, the deaths of nearly 200 Palestinian journalists. The United States saw Indiana University fire cybersecurity professor Xiaofeng Wang following raids by the FBI and DHS. Wang is accused of concealing funding from China for a project that received U.S. federal research grants. In Michigan, a man sent a bomb threat to the Sunrise cruise ship, which was diverted to Jamaica in January 24 after his girlfriend left him to care for their pets. Across the Asia-Pacific region, IAEA is monitoring influenza cases, while Tonga and Fiji are tracking dengue fever. Tongan Prime Minister Dr. Isaac Ig has accused his predecessor, Huakavameliku, of unspecified wrongdoing. Indonesians promised jobs in Cambodia are reporting forced labor and scamming activities in clandestine compounds. Sweden's textile recycling facilities are struggling with fast fashion waste, leading to demands for producer responsibility. Scientists have mapped the painted lady butterfly's annual migration from Africa to Europe, recognizing it as the longest butterfly migration known. Photographer Lucas Foglia documents this journey in constant bloom. Elsewhere in the Dominican Republic, the family of Virgilio Cruz, who perished in a nightclub roof collapse, has filed a complaint seeking homicide charges against the owners of the Jet Set nightclub for alleged negligence. Dubai's Mall of the Emirates, home to an indoor ski slope, is set for a $1.30 billion renovation. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.